Welcome to Placecast, a local policy innovation partnership hub production based at the University of Birmingham. Placecast is essential listening for those keen to explore the ins and outs of knowledge mobilisation for influence through central and local government, based on the view that it is only through animating the power of place-based leadership the wicked problems of 2026 can become more manageable. Whether you are a researcher, citizen scientist, an activist, a professional working within the public sector, a civil servant, politician, analyst or entrepreneur, we think that it's through our networks that most solutions can be assembled, tested and the learning shared before we go again, and that universities can act as the repositories and observatories of these efforts. We're based in City-REDI and rooted in the LPIP programme funded by the ESRC, AHRC and Innovate UK. This podcast aims to highlight knowledge and evidence-based ways of working and the strategies needed to make a real impact on the decisions that shape our society. Our guests are changemakers from across the UK with stories about the ways in which influence can be achieved. We focus in particular on some of the connective tissue within and between sectors for clues as to how to animate place-based leadership, as innovating is a team sport best done in the open. Please contact us with feedback on the episodes, or if you'd like to be a guest or have strong views on the processes of advocacy, lobbying, public campaigning and more. Unpacking how research and evidence connect with neighbourhood, local, city, regional and national missions. In this episode of Placecast, Dr Gerardo Arriaga-Garcia, Research Fellow at City-REDI, is joined by Nina Ruddle, Head of Public Policy Engagement at Wrexham University, and Sophie Cloutterbuck, Director of London Engagement and the London Met Lab at London Metropolitan University, for a conversation on what really enables innovation to take root in different places. Together, they explore how regional skills, trust, stewardship and intermediary glue work can either unlock or constrain local development, drawing out lessons from two very different contexts, North Wales and London. The episode asks what policymakers too often miss when they focus only on infrastructure, investment and formal strategy, and make the case for a more relational, place-sensitive approach to innovation and growth.
Hello and welcome to Placecast, a podcast from the Local Policy Innovation Partnership Hub, based at the University of Birmingham and supported through the LPIP program financed by the UKRI. I am Gerardo Javier Arriaga-Garcia, a research fellow at City-REDI at the University of Birmingham, and I will be your host for this episode. My work focuses on inclusive innovation, place-based development, and how knowledge and evidence can be brought closer to the people and decisions that shape communities. On this episode, we're exploring a question that sits at the heart of place-based innovation. What really helps regions grow, adapt, and innovate well to local challenges? Is it technical expertise, local relationships, trusted institutions, or the often unseen work of bringing people together across systems? To help us think that through, I'm joined by two brilliant guests working in very different regional contexts, Wales and London, but grappling with many of the same underlying questions. First, I'm delighted to welcome Nina Ruddle, Head of Public Policy Engagement at Wrexham University. Nina has been at the heart of some of the most important work across North Wales, helping to build partnerships, civic platforms, and shared ways of working that support more joined-up, place-sensitive innovation. I think that what makes her perspective especially valuable is the way she brings together policy, institutional leadership, and community insight while keeping trust, stewardship, and long-term change firmly in view. Nina, welcome.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Thanks.
And I'm also really pleased to welcome Sophie Cloutterbuck, Director of London Engagement and the London Met Lab at London Metropolitan University. Sophie's work offers a sharp and deeply grounded view of how innovation happens in a city as complex as London, not as one place, but as many places, communities and local economies layered together. She has done a great deal to show why convening, translation, and trust are not just helpful extras, but central to making local systems work better for the people they are meant to serve. Sophie, welcome.
Thanks very much. Really pleased to be here.
All right, so with that, let's turn to the big question at the heart of this episode. So when we talk about innovation in a place, what are we still not seeing clearly enough? Let me come to Nina first on the North Wales perspective, and then Sophie, I will bring you in on whether that looks different in London.
I think it's a really interesting question, and what we're not seeing enough of in innovation for me is an investment in the relationships and the infrastructure that it takes to build relationships and therefore trust. And I think the reason I say that is from personal experience of the work I'm doing across the region and in Wales. Everywhere I go in conferences and events with the LPIP Hub and many other events, at the heart of everything is often the trust element, which is relational, but it's the thing that we, for me, don't invest enough effort in and don't value it in the way that it should be. Because if we don't have that, and we can see that across the UK at the moment, that there's an erosion of trust in institutions to look after and protect citizens in the way that we should be doing that. So I think for me, it's about investment in an infrastructure of relational development that therefore builds trust, and delivering what we say we're going to do once we've listened to citizens as well. So that again comes full circle into that. How would you trust anyone if they didn't deliver what you asked them to, or what they promised to do? And I think that for me is the fundamental crux of everything to do with place-based local growth and innovation and development.
Thanks, Nina. That's really, really helpful. So, what gets missed then when innovation is discussed without trust and relationships in place? Sophie, do you want to now tell us more about your work and what that means for London?
Thanks. Yeah, first of all, agree with everything Nina said. Trust is something I literally hear on the daily. Every meeting I'm in, it's mentioned. Every bit of research I do, it comes up. But I think it's more understanding what the trust is about as well. So I know from my point of view in London, a big part of the trust is people don't value other people's expertise. They don't listen to the community and what their expertise are, or it might be a university doesn't value the expertise of a local NHS or the local government, or the local government doesn't, and all around. That's what a lot of I find keep on coming up at the moment. Going back at the moment, we're quite fractious in the way people work together, and that just adds to it, not believing people have something to offer. Nina mentioned citizens before, and we don't listen to our citizens. We don't hear what they've got to say. We think they're a number, they're a tick box. They can't be like that. We need to trust their experiences, their lived experiences, and the difference it can make. You know, we have 32 different boroughs within London. Each one's its own little town. Citizens, residents see their borough, but then they have the Greater London Authority. It's also making decisions. Then they have their schools. So it's that trust of who makes the decisions, who's making things better, where can you get your voice heard?
Thanks, Sophie. That's very powerful. And, I would like to ask a follow-up question on that because I am personally very interested, and also for years I've been working on the issue of trust. So would either of you go as far as saying that trust is part or should be part of the infrastructure of innovation?
I'd say 100%. Without it, you can't be innovative. I'd say, personally, that's my thought.
I completely agree, and it's actually where Sophie and I connect, is that we use what is deemed softer skills to build that trust and relationships in place with people, in partnerships, in the system, with communities, with citizens, with children, young people, anywhere in a place that is about people. I also think that difference between what we deem hard and soft skills, the soft skills for some reason is not as valued as that sort of the technical expertise that you need, which we've both got as well. But actually it's the softer skills that are the things that build the resilience and build the partnerships and create that sort of space to convene and come together to not only listen, which is, again, I agree totally with what Sophie says, but listen, but to find different ways of listening, and not about the way that we perceive listening as public services and the way we want to receive messages. Actually listening in a really different way, and using different methods through arts and creativity, or the felt experience, or engaging in ways that are more meaningful to people everyday lives, and I think that's where there's a fundamental shift now in policy, in government priorities, and in Wales we've got legislation called the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which is a framework to enable that type of work, which I guess is what I've used as a framework. And in comparison to London, we are rural in North Wales, 750,000, which is probably one of the boroughs in London, So it's more dispersed. So the challenges are different, but the methods we're using are the same. So there's something really interesting in there to reflect on.
Right, that's really, really helpful, Nina. And actually, I think that's a very nice sequel into my next question, because both of you are pushing beyond the usual distinction between hard and soft skills. So, what are those real skills that make innovation possible in a place? And perhaps we can start with you, Sophie. Could you say that and a little bit more about how do you translate between community, policy, and institution?
The first one, before I get onto that, I'd just like to say that I think the first bit of skill you need is patience. And you also have to be flexible, adaptable, and you can't be going into a situation thinking, this is how I want it to end. I think that's really important, because too many people do go in thinking what the outcome is. And as Nina, well, I'm sure, is nodding with me, you can't go into it that way. So I think that's a real skill, is being able to go into a room, hear what people are saying, and think of how that can address a challenge, solve a problem, have an outcome from it, which is a skill in itself. I also think the skill in translating, it's about, as Nina sort of mentioned this a moment, she said we have the soft skills, but we also have the hard skills. So we have the skills to understand what's coming out of academia. We are doing academia, but we also have the skills to be talking to the local grassroots organisation on a one-on-one in the middle of a park somewhere, or for me near the local estate or wherever it might be. Equally, we can go in and talk to local government or national government. We're having the same conversation with all these people, but we're doing it in different ways and translating it across. It's not about dumbing down. It's not about using plain English. It's not about those things, because as I go back to before, people have expertise in all the areas that there are. It's just framing it. For example, I work with councils a lot, local councils, and I work in HEI. I've just done it myself. I work in a university. Both of them have a million acronyms to the fact that when I started working in local councils, one organisation provides a list on the back of notepads of all the acronyms in councils so you can understand. Start talking to people in real words, explaining how that acronym is exactly the same as yours. It's about translating without dumbing down, without expecting, treating people that they haven't got the expertise. And there's a lot more, but I'm going to let Nina answer some more of them before I add on.
Well, I think just to build on that, Sophie, actually, and I think you would agree with this, is that it takes a lot of time. So there is a patience element, but there is a time element as well to investing in building trust, because it's almost like for the work I've been doing in North Wales, again, a community of 750,000, rural, coastal, dispersed, lots of challenges, and a language as well. So we're a devolved nation, own legislation, devolved education, health, etc. So we've got like different levels, and I think the one thing that I've done is recognized that it takes time to build platforms or partnerships that actually are truly understanding of not only professionals and the middle bit, not the strategic leaders, the chief execs, the ones, the local authority officers and natural resources Wales officers, or the people that are actually at the coalface, so to speak, day in, day out, and how then we also engage not the citizens level with the middle bit and with the strategic level. So you have to be understanding of all the different levels within a place, which can be really complex, particularly in a place like London and in Wales, because of the differences in the way that we work. That time to invest in bringing together partnerships in an informal way is really hard work, but it, when invested in, can be incredibly powerful. And we've got a great example in North Wales called the North Wales Insight Partnership, very organic, where I spoke to the public service boards, which is the mechanism that we have in Wales to deliver the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, collaborative service boards. And I was like, why don't we just work together? Because we're one region, and there's 3 of them in North Wales. And we work together to pool resources, share data and evidence, engage citizens in a truly meaningful way to create systems change. Now, that's took nearly 6 or 7 years to get to this position, but we're in a position now where we've got a website and it's started to really galvanise, because we've just got on in an informal way, understanding where we are professionally, understanding that we just want to get stuff done, but understanding the constraints of policy, governance, and resources. And we've still, despite all of those challenges, managed to get things done. And that's what's built trust with citizens and communities, and with and across the system and partnerships as well. So I think that's an example I can use of the time it takes and the energy and the resilience, I think, which I think Sophie will probably agree with me on that.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you don't mind, I 100% agree on the time. It's something that we always talk about. You cannot get these relationships in a one-off project. All my proper networks, proper relationships have been 6 years plus now. I think what's interesting, Nina was saying about her project coming up organically, which I think is really great. And recently I've had the chance to look at, I suppose, two different ways. A project that's not funded for relationship, which is where I'm in two different anchor institution networks. So I'm in an anchor institution network in place in my local borough, but I'm also in the Greater London Authority's local anchor institution network. Both of them don't provide funding to the organisations that are part of it, but the organisations that are part have decided that they're in place, they need to make a difference in place, they want to come together. They do spend time together, but I wouldn't say they is as tight. We've worked together a long time and it's coming together and it's going well. One of the other things I'm working on is the health determinants research collaboration. Now, I'm on one in Tower Hamlets, but there are 3 others in London. I'm actually doing some of my LPIP fellowship looking at the different HDRCs. And that's where £5 million has been given to each one of these to build framework and capacity. But the biggest part of it, and the biggest part we keep on coming up with, is the trust issue. And we're spending hours trying to build trust. We're having meetings, and having that time that is funded to give people that opportunity to have that time has actually made a world of difference. And we've actually come on a lot of steps having that time where we can say, let's all get in the room for 3 hours this afternoon and talk some of this stuff through. I've never had that opportunity before in other projects to actually talk through the issues of trust between us. And having that space and funding space that has actually really helped. And now not only are we working with them on those projects, we're moving on to other places within the council because we've really been able to develop that trust. And I think having that funding, having that time that people are like, well, this is part of my job doing this isn't an add-on, has really made it a lot easier, but harder in a way because we've dug deeper. But I think in the long run, it means that the relationship will stand for a long, long time. And it's not only helped with the relationships with that, it's within the universities as well. One of the other big differences between London and Wales is, Nina, I'm not sure how many universities there are where she is, but
in Wales there's 9.
9 in Wales. In London, there are 45 London universities, 65 universities if you include ones from out of London. And if you include international and private, there's 104 universities in London. So we have to trust each other as well. And it's also about learning how we work across unis to solve problems rather than to not trust each other and think we're a competition with each other. But still back to time. Time, I think, is the real answer to building a lot of these relationships as well.
I would like to actually ask a follow-up question, because you've already mentioned a couple of pieces of advice on trust building relationships. And I wonder if you could expand on that, because the Placecast audience a lot of them are policymakers, practitioners, and researchers. What would you say are the key ingredients to building trust? You mentioned time and patience. What else is needed for relationships to work over the long run?
For me, I think there's a curiosity of an organisational humility and curiosity that is from the leadership. I think that's really, really important, because I think for me, universities in some settings can be quite ivory tower, and the front door of university is very difficult to find. When you've got 104, like in London, where do you go if you want some help, if you've got a research question that you want to unpack and explore? So I think, there's something about that aspect. I think there's also something around learning ecosystem. So when you learn together in leadership or whatever you do, or delivery, it inevitably feeds the system and feeds the networks and the way. And so maintaining networks through a learning ecosystem, which again is what we've tried to do across the region, is develop the skills of systems leadership and the understanding as a foundation that creates networks that then drives the change both in the middle bit with the leadership at the executive level and influences policy. But at the heart of it, it's about elevating the voices of citizens into the system so that the people within those systems make those decisions based on the insight, the data, and the evidence, so that actually we can truly do what we should be doing to make a difference to the communities we serve and those big, massive challenges that are out there, like inequalities, climate change. Yeah, that they're the areas I think that would. I'm sure there's Sophie would have a lot more to contribute.
Thanks, Nina. Sophie?
I would agree. I think the networks, you can't do this work without networks. And I always talk about how when I first started this role, I'd go into a conference or a meeting or whatever, and I wouldn't know a person. And I'd always look around, people chatting, thinking, how do they all know each other? Now, Nina and I, we don't get time to talk to all the people we know in a room anymore because we know so many people. But it really helps when you're looking at challenges. We're not siloed, whether we're unis or not, whether we're in competition with others. To actually make real change, we have to work together and we have to understand how our networks can help us. So in London, Nina's point about how does someone know what uni to go to when there's 104 of them? Well, in London, we have a network called London Hire, and I'm the chair of their civic network. So I have a group of, I think there's 65 people on my network who are all doing a similar job to Nina and I in universities across London. We've done a map to show all the work we're doing. So there's a single place that someone can come and they can go, oh, I want to do work in environment. I can go on this map. Oh, all those unis are doing civic work in environment. I can go and grab one of them. And we have our contact details, single point of contact. And I think that's a big thing. It's not that Nina and I want to be the only person that's known. We don't. We want other people to know all of our contacts. But our contacts don't need 4,000 people to choose from when they're trying to get something done. So I think it is about making it easy as well for people to get, and that was, easy access away from the ivory doors. People understanding that our roles we are anchors in the community. We do have a role to make a difference to the community. We're not just there, doing things that other people don't understand. I think the skills, back to the skills question that we need as well, is translating that not only externally but internally within our world as well. Our vice chancellors need to understand why as a university we're doing this work. Not every uni in London does this work. Not every university in the country does this work. Some come in and out of it, and you'll see a lot of it is led by the senior leaders and how they're doing it. So a skill is when new senior leaders are coming in, how do you convince them that they need to keep this work going? So I think that's another skill as well, keeping this work at the forefront when people don't necessarily see it as everyday work, and making how you get people to understand that as well.
Building on Sophie's point, I think going to that relationship point is that you don't have a relationship with an organisation, you have a relationship with a person. It's person to person, and people will go to that London Hire because it's Sophie or it's Nina because they know us and they know. So there is something really powerful in sort of looking at those people that are those sort of conveners of a system, change makers that have skin in the game and care about it, but you're convening but not controlling the system. And I think that's a real big difference that we have been lucky enough, I guess, to evolve our roles to be like that with the support of leadership. And I think the second point, just building on Sophie's point there, which was unpacked a bit, is how do we truly value what civic means? And the whole nature of civic is place-based and people-based. So it inherently will be very different in different places. But as Sophie and I are demonstrating, there's clearly some commonalities and synergies in the way that we're working and enabling our work that is having similar impacts. Now, I guess in a relatively complex place-based environment with significant challenges. So there is a real interesting about how we translate and how we value the the delivery of what we're delivering, and it's value it in its purest sense, not by metrics, which we can do. I as like Sophie, and like we all can, I can give you a list of numbers of people we've engaged with, but whether that engagement's had any impact on that person, or I'd rather have one impact on one person choosing to go to university, or creating a path in their lives that we've helped them navigate and connect to, as education as a tool to drive the future that they want, that supports our place and our people, the place we love and the people that live in it, And so I think there's something about, how do we really truly value civic, and what does that really mean? I know there's lots of sort of publications about that, and it goes back to Sophie and I connected through the NCCPE, through the Brilliant Poor Manners. But there was also, we had a discussion at an event in November at the LPIP Hub, because trust and that convening role and the value of it was really reflected in the feedback of all the LPIP hubs, the 4 across the UK. The strong message I got was, we need to have convening roles, and therefore they build the trust. So the LPIPs have done a great job, but the trust is just really starting to take hold and take root. And wow, there's so many opportunities, and then the funding ends. So there is something about looking longer, as well as the value of the roles and relationships of being civic, of being convenient and not controlling. I think there is a lot of synergy in the way we're working, but in completely different geographies, I think.
That's really powerful. Thanks, Nina. I think you've already touched upon some of the things I wanted to ask. London and rural ways, they look very different. London, messy, chaotic, high density, competition. North Wales, dispersed communities, long-term relationship building. So what do those differences mean in practice for innovation? Perhaps we can start with you, Sophie. You can paint the London picture first.
Do you think it'd be easier with so much options in London? But actually, it's messy. It's really messy, and people go to different places, and people use, as Nina mentioned earlier, she said it's the relationship. As much as you're with organisations, it's the people at the relationships. So sometimes the relationships are there already, and people are going to people who don't have the expertise, and you'll be knocking on the door going, hang on, we probably have better expertise. How do we come that across in London? Literally, I was talking to the Greater London Authority yesterday about some skills work they were doing, and they were doing it with a Russell Group university, just one Russell Group university. And my question was, will you have lots of post 1992 universities in London that used to be polytechnics, that used to do vocational learning? That is their skill. You want to look at vocational skills. Why didn't you bring the post 1992 into the conversation, who would understand more from that point of view? And his answer was, I'll be honest, I knew someone at that Russell Group, so I just phoned them up. He said, now I've met you and I'm now on the list, going to be invited to the meetings, etc. It just hadn't occurred to him because he knew someone, he went to it. So that makes a mess again, because there's so many people who've got friends at universities in London who are working in London as well. But on the other hand, we have the businesses that can buy into innovation. We have the money coming into London. We do have more opportunities to work together as universities as well. So, for example, the project I was talking about that I'm doing with myself at London Met, Tower Hamlets, I'm also doing with Queen Mary and UEL. I don't know if we would have been on that programme without Queen Mary. So that made it easier, because I had a good relationship with Queen Mary. They invited us in to bid with them. So I think there's a lot of pros and a lot of cons. And I'm sure Nina's now going to say some ones that aren't the opposite, because I think as much as there is that, I think actually the more Nina and I have talked, there's actually more commonality through the work we do, even though it seems so different, the areas. And as much as the challenges we're trying to deal with, trying to work with, will be different, as much as our neighbourhoods and our citizens will be different. Even at my uni, I have 148 different languages spoken. I'm sure that, it's going to be different. I think the commonality of how we build our relationships, how we listen to our partners, our stakeholders, our communities, is actually the same. So I think that's the interesting part. I don't know what you think, Nina.
Yeah, I would I would completely agree. And I think the more that we speak, the more that I realise that the methods that we use and the way that we approach things, the way that we built the partnership and translated and navigated the partnership landscape, which is complex in North Wales for a different reason, not because of the numbers, but because we work across all sectors. So, and I know you probably do as well, but even with 104 universities, we've got 2 in North Wales, so we can work with them, but we can then mobilise action across a regional footprint that allows us to really push boundaries and innovate in the framework of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which I use as a sort of North Star, if you like, for our work, you know. And within that, it's how do we use the principles of sustainable development? And if you underpin everything you do with that, then actually you can't go far wrong with tackling poverty, inequality, climate change, all the big challenges that we've got. So I think in Wales, we are obviously devolved. We've got, I think, the Future Generations Act, Social Care and Wellbeing Act. They're progressive policies that are quite challenging to implement because they are really progressive in the way that they've been set out in stature. And so the work I've done is trying to work with those policies and make them really alive for the people in the system, delivering projects and doing things differently. For citizens, so we listen and we involve them, and then we do what we say we're going to do. So I think you don't necessarily need a framework to do that, but there's very clear, you know, collaborate as a first off, involve citizens, integrate where we can, which makes sense, look long term, which is one of the biggest challenges, and wherever we can, trying to prevent problems from getting worse, because that's one thing we don't want to do is that. For me, the geography of Wales is 3 million in the whole nation, so we should be small enough to mobilise and innovate, which I think we are, and there's some great stuff going on in Wales. And at the moment I'm working with Kaya Partnership and Kaya Park, which is based in Wrexham, and it's the biggest housing estate in Europe. So it's a real challenge. It's a brilliant area. It's on the doorstep of the university, and we are really creating place networks and partnerships with Kaya Park so that actually we can work together for the long term for the benefits of the people of Wrexham. And then that interfaces with the City Board, which is part of the UK-wide Pride in Place programme. So, you know, what we're doing is constantly weaving together all of these different programmes that come from UK government, from our Welsh government, and making sure that the impact is what it should be for the communities that we serve. And it's not always right. In our region, it's smaller scale to London in a way, but then it's geographically it's really diverse and really different, so it does make it interesting. But at the foundation of it all is people, and that's it. And people that care about place. And I always call it the coalition of will. I will work with and lean in and lean into and with the people that care about place in the same way I do. So you have that sort of common purpose and a commitment to change, which often public service has. But I think there's now a big shift in how we are working differently with third sector and businesses as well, to really leverage everything we can to just make our places the best they can be for the people that live there. And that's at the foundation, I think, of everything we do. And we're using the lever of a university and education as the core and research to underpin that. And I do feel in that way universities are really unique and privileged because we hold a set of skills that, if used in the right way, can make such huge differences. And I feel really privileged to be in that position to do this work. So I don't know whether Sophie agrees with that, although it is challenging with all this previous challenges set out. It is a real privilege to do the work with citizens, communities and policy in the way that we do.
You could argue that one lesson is that no place is too small or too big or too complex for stewardship. It's just that stewardship takes a different form depending on where you are. And it feels like a really strong theme in both of your reflections is that, brokering, trust development, and convening are crucial. They're not side activities, and they seem to be actually the work. But then the question is, if that's the case, why do you think that this intermediary roles, whilst they're so important, they are still so often undervalued. And maybe I can start with you, Nina, first on, convening as an output that you can fund, and then I move on to you, Sophie, about how that looks like in the London platforms.
I think it's a really interesting question, and I think it's because the role of convening and not controlling is that it goes back to some of those principles of integration. So sometimes you have to give power away in order to collaborate, and organizations, if they're measured on a certain way of how they deliver or the impact they're having, that's what your priority will be. So it's sometimes the measurements we're creating in a system from governments, etc., can really curtail that collaborative effort, because you have to sometimes not deliver against something or give power away or give resource away in order to pool it to have a greater impact that you may not feel now, but you might feel in 25 years time or 50 years time. So how do we, and it goes back to value again, doesn't it? How do we measure it? Do we measure it? And how do people value, as in leaders, politicians, policymakers, value the work of translating voices and citizens into spaces to make decisions that actually have an impact? And I think there's something in how we measure that process and not seeing the skills as just soft or fluffy. The work that we do, I think, is almost the hard stuff, and it's that sort of dichotomy between hard and soft, one being good, one being bad, but actually it's the combination of those two things. So
Sophie, you did mention before the issue of funding. So what makes a good intermediary when it comes to practice, and particularly what should, in your opinion, remain when the funding ends, assuming these intermediary roles are really that important, which I think they are.
No, I do think they are. And I think sometimes it's a difficult one because sometimes people want to fund you to do the role as well, which I'll give you an example in a minute. Nina just said it's not only about the time and the convening, but it's about we're not going in leading, but we are going in translating for people as well. And I think that's a skill we're looking at as well, is the translation of policy, of people, what we're hearing from the community, etc. But I think it's weird. Like some people really do see the role. My boss at work. Their word is you need to be in the room. You being in the room is a job in itself, and they see my role being in the room is how you start making the change. So that's really interesting. But I was working with a local council that I've built up a very good relationship with. I thought I was just having a normal meeting with them one day, and they went to me, "Oh, our relationship with our local voluntary sector is entirely broken down. We're meant to be writing a new voluntary sector strategy with them. We were about to give them money, but we want to give all the money to you so you can set it up and you can do it instead." And I got colleagues involved, and we have done the whole VCSF strategy for this local borough, us working with the local VCSFE, making sure they're totally as facilitators. They came to me because they trusted me. They came to me because they saw that role as a convener. They understood I was neutral. They could see what difference it would make. And actually, something they've been trying to do for 3 years, we've completed now. And it's moved on. And so that was the local council saw that it's getting the feedback out there that this makes a difference. That's why I'm hoping projects like the HDRC, projects like that, people start to understand that that role is actually the really needed role. Because I think as well as people like us within higher education, a couple of the projects I've been doing, we've had the same role within the local council. And yesterday I was in a different meeting with the person who's got the same role within London NHS as me and Nina. It's important to have our roles. And so that's 3 different areas I'm talking about that all have our roles. And then if you look at private business, how many corporate social responsibility departments are there? Those people actually, when you take it down, are doing something similar to our roles as well. So I think it's not making everyone understand these roles are important. I think it's making higher education understand these roles are important.
That's actually quite powerful. Nina, you want to add something to that?
The other thing that I think Sophie and I probably do well in our respective areas is connect people as well. So you'll have a knowledge of the partnerships, of the landscapes, of the people of the place, and you will be able to then connect those people up with, you know, strong and weak ties. You call that, you have those people that you know in your immediate sphere, but what we'll have is very big networks of lots of people we know and know of us, and it's that connecting role is crucially important, actually, but woefully undervalued and sort of misunderstood, I think, as well. So that connecting of people can actually drive such change, and that knowledge, institutional knowledge that we have, is like, you know, that Sophie's example, she has to be in the room, and I've got examples with that where you have to translate for everyone in the room in a way, and bring that connecting ability and that ability to understand and frame it and reframe it for those different players, so that actually we can all understand it and get that commitment to drive change. But I completely agree with Sophie. The value of connecting and civic work that we do, I don't think is understood. Therefore, it's difficult to value, because the nature of what we do, as we are talking now, you know, it evolves, it's organic, it's because we're humans and we're all building relationships all the time, and they're changing and people move on, and you have to keep, it's a constant cycle of understanding where people are coming from, why and how you translate it and plug it back into the system to create change. And that for me is what education's about, that underpinning of learning, research and evidence, but also relations. And I think universities are so wonderfully placed to be that glue to do that work. And I find it a bit sad sometimes that there's lots of people like us working really, really hard to do some fantastic work across the UK, because they care, and it's not as valued as perhaps some others. And I think it goes back into that theoretical about the role of a university and, you know, public and private facing, and how do we navigate those challenges as well, which is probably a far bigger debate not to be had now. But
That's really powerful and beautiful, the issue of, being human. And I want to come back to the issue of, translation, which I think is core, and it's going to be just a couple more questions before the end of the podcast. One I think is crucial now. It's kind of lingering there, and everyone talks about it, but we haven't unpacked it. Is the issue of AI in relation to your role and in relation to local skills, hard, soft, or system skills, as you referred to, Nina. I would like to get your take on that, because AI has come to disrupt every industry, and how do you see this affecting the issue of building trust? Maybe I can start with you, Sophie, with the London perspective, because London is one of the places that is leading on that.
Okay, I would say as much as AI is disrupting all business, or changing, whatever you want to call it, all business, AI can't build relationships and AI can't build trust. As we know, AI isn't the all saying, it's people feed into AI what comes out. It's got to come from somewhere, but it's not that tangible. Like, I'll be honest, I don't think I could do this job just like this on screen the whole time. It's the fact I go and have coffees with people in cafes. It's the fact that we'll be out digging trees together, planting trees or whatever. That's where you build the relationship. It's not over email. It's not that AI could write me some great emails that send and I could get these great relationships going. That's not how that trust building and relationship works. So it's one area I'm not actually worried about AI taking over that much. It's, maybe it can help with systems and theories that people are looking at, but the actual day-to-day work is personal. It is, Nina said this right at the start of the conversation, that we're not going in talking to businesses or talking to organizations or talking to councils. We're talking to people. And there's always going to be people. So I can't see, I mean, maybe I'm being naive, and maybe Nina's got a better idea of how AI could take over, but I just don't. I think this is one area of work that AI can't do, because we haven't touched on this much in the conversation. We're talking about skills we need, etc. but there is a personality needed as well for this work. And I don't mean you have to have a personality, you have to have a certain type of personality to do this work. It's a long slog, it's a lot of letdowns, there's a lot of arguments, there's a lot of everything else. You have to be tenacious, you have to be a certain sort of person. AI can't build that person and have that, do you see what I mean? It's personality. I know Nina, I'm sure agree, but we know lots of people across the countries, across the nations who do this work, and we might not be the same people, but all of us, there's something about us, we're similar.
Thanks, Sophie. I truly hope that you're right, and I also believe human relations is probably the only thing that cannot be replaced. But then I see news like yesterday, Mark Zuckerberg creating his AI version where now employees don't talk to him, they talk to his AI sort of version, which I find that quite disturbing. But I still believe that you can build trust only on a face-to-face human interaction, and I think that's the stronghold, that the part that will never be replaced by AI. So thanks, Nina.
I think AI is going to be incredibly helpful for the roles that I think Sophie and I do. Now, the reason I say that is because doing some of the more transactional stuff, AI can be really helpful, make you really productive, really efficient and effective, where we can then deploy our skills in the stuff that we know makes the impact and the stuff that we're good at, and I guess you enjoy. So for me, AI is an incredibly helpful tool for our work because it will allow us to do that transactional stuff easier, so to create that time. I think the other thing that AI can't do that we can is to build stories, and I mean that by bringing almost the heart and the emotion to everything. So the AI can do that transactional data evidence, and used in the right way can be an incredibly brilliant and powerful tool. I think the difference that we can bring is that stories, emotion, creative, that makes us uniquely human. And I think it goes back to this existential, like, what is it to be human? What does it mean now? And I think for me, we come, a nation of storytellers in Wales, and what are people's stories and how those stories are framed helps us drive what's important for policy and what we do to live well in society together. So I think there's something, for me, they can retell a story, but you can't bring that emotion into it, that thing that touches your heart and makes you want to do something, or makes you want to stand up and be angry, or be sad, or be really frustrated with things, because it's that drives us as humans to create the change together or on our own. And I think that for me is at the moment not what AI can do, but who knows where it's going to evolve into. But that they're for me the biggest, those two areas of time back to do the stuff that we're good at, and the heart, the emotion and the stories for that I think we probably do in our roles day in and day out.
Thank you. That's a really powerful intervention as well, Sophie and Nina. A lot of the discussion now about participation and creation taking place, they talk about the issue of co-creation and participation. How do you create spaces where the voices of the community are really heard without being imposed by or silenced by jargon, because your role is to filter that jargon? So what does it take to make participation genuinely consequential without just consultation?
Yeah, I'd like to add just something else on the top of that as well, which is
Yeah.
I think is quite inherently London, is some of our boroughs are over-researched and extracted and extracted and extracted and extracted information from them that never goes back to them. So a lot of the time when I go into a room, that's what that's coming from, is their history of having information extracted from them. Before you start anything, you have to get an understanding of what that meant for them, how that hurt them, what that made them feel, before you can even move on to what the actual listening piece. It's back to what we were saying about our convening powers at the start. We're there to hear, we're not there to lead. And it's almost, I use the word mediator as well, or a bridge between these people that want to discuss whatever it might be for the co-production. The first place is, we might think it's the same challenge that different partners are looking at, but is it? So going back to the project I was talking to you about in Tower Hamlets before, We've been doing this project for 3 years now, and we had a meeting last week, and we realised partners still don't have the same view on what the output should be. So it's very much about not just hearing, but feeding back what a step and doing everything together step by step. It's not about us as the people coming, okay, we've heard you, now we're going to go off and do this, see you in 8 months. It's interesting, I'm doing some research for my LPIP fellowship. I said to one of the people I was interviewing, okay, when I've got the draft report, I'll send it over to you and you can see it before I publish it. And this was a community organisation of VCS. And they wrote back to me going, do you know, you're the first person to ever have offered that. And we really like the fact you're the first person. So they feel like they're part of it and they understand the next steps. It's, even though I was going off doing something, a slight different example, but still the example of people extracting, disappearing and the community never hearing. So it shouldn't be about Nina or I in the room. I think that's what I'm trying to say. It's about how we make those things happen without it being about us.
Thanks, Sophie. Nina, do you want to expand on that, the issue of avoiding consultation and making it genuinely involving people?
There's two really good examples of work that we've done. And I think just picking up on the bridge point, there's a beautiful phrase, and I can't remember what it is in Welsh. If you want to be a leader, be a bridge. You know, it's almost like people walk over you to get to the other side. And sometimes you do feel like that in partnership working. But, you know, I think there's two examples I wanted to give, which is where we've used different types of methods, engagement methods and research methods, to work with communities in all sorts of ways. The first one is Wrexham City Board, which is, again, UK Pride at Place programme across the UK. We worked with the town board, as it was, and engaged 4,000 citizens across Wrexham to go, what is it? What's your one big idea? And we used postcards as a bit of a reflection and a nod to the olden days when people used to send things and pictures, and it was this beautiful method that engaged young people, old people, workplaces, that was about what's your one big idea, what would you want to see in Wrexham in order to see the future you want. We collated that and did a thematic analysis. It went back into the city board and they've used that to create the plan. So there's a real clear line to go, we've done this engagement, we've understood and listened, we've created this content that then's driving the priorities of where that funding is going to go over the next 10 years. Now, for me, that's massive because it will be evidence, because the work that happens as a result of it is constantly going to be ongoing in Wrexham over the next 10 years plus. So it's messy at the beginning, but it's a linear way of how do we have that feedback loop and evidence it. I think the second one I just wanted to touch on, it goes back to stories again. We've got a method called public narrative. It's a method that Marshall Gantz developed in Harvard. We use it and we coach and work with young people to use this method of sharing what matters to you and what you want an audience and people to do about it. And it's about building efficacy and advocacy and leadership skills in young people. We do it with all sorts of age groups. We hosted an event with the National ASUB, Adverse Childhood Experiences, in North Wales, and we worked with 3 schools, a primary school and 2 high schools, Welsh medium and English medium. And those young people, some of primary school age, they were 9. They stood on a stage with 120 people in the audience, from Welsh Government, policy leaders, policy makers, and they said, this is what I care about and this is what I want you to do about it. And there was amazing narratives of a young girl who'd come to a school in Flintshire, and she'd been Croeso Cymru, which is welcome to Wales, and she'd been welcomed in to Wales with open arms, and she was from Afghanistan, and she came over here 4 years ago, and she just went, I want every child in Wales to have Croeso Cymru so they can be welcomed into Wales, into, and I think that's just that kindness and compassion at the heart of everything we do is so simple, but really sometimes so difficult to achieve. And that framework that we taught those young people on those stages, but the simplicity and the powerfulness of their messages, not only have they got that skill to take away in their lives, but actually then Welsh Government and other partners were working together to go and speak to those schools again and continue that journey with them to go, okay, how do we make this happen now? So they are 2 great examples for me. Like, as you can see, I get quite animated, but it makes me realise that the work I do, the work we do, the work many of our colleagues do makes such a difference. And when you feel it and see it in that way, it really motivates you to continue doing this work despite some of the challenges.
That's amazing. That's very powerful, especially because you're talking about impact. It's real. It's something that did happen, and the longevity of it all.
Yeah, while Nina was talking, it got me thinking about young people as well and what we teach young people. So we have a project at London Met that's been running 20 years this year, where we have 200 local young people in every day. And part of it is about helping them with their GCSEs. But a big part with these students and also our students at the university is teaching them to be active civic leaders. So we actually do courses with them on change, on campaigning, etc. And what's been really interesting is for the last 18 years, the young mayor of that borough has come from our project every year for the last 18 years. So the fact that they've gone, and these young people on this course, just to put it in context, were put on this course because they were predicted to fail their GCSEs. So not only are they passing their GCSEs, but they're learning about citizenship. They're becoming not just citizen, but really active citizens, not only always got the mayor of the borough now, but also some are working with the Greater London Authority, and they're actually going out being civic leaders themselves. So I think one part I just want to make sure we got onto this podcast. All my projects, I have students from the university working on all of my projects. We are actively trying to teach them to be good civic leaders as well. The same with the young people that are coming in. We're doing the same. And I think the more we can do of that, the more people there will be with that thought again. There used to be more civic change. People as residents used to speak up more. There used to be more civic marches, etc. I think getting them to understand again is really interesting, and seeing that movement as well is actually an important part of our role, but really great to see, like Nina gets enthused. It's so lovely seeing this next generation who's hopefully going to allow us to retire, Nina.
Just have one last question, and this is about the Placecast magic wand. So I'm gonna let you have a wave with the place-based innovation magic wand, and it can grant one wish. So you can have absolute power to do one thing, but it has to use the SMART approach: specific, measurable, actionable, recordable, and transferable. I'm gonna give you a few seconds to think about it. What is that one thing you would wish that would happen, that you could do, either a power that you can have to change something or change something directly into the system that would benefit the most of the people in the community?
It just relates to my previous point I just made, that I would like, being specific, every child in the UK to be educated with or understand the public narrative methods, so how they can use their voice to drive change, because then we would create leaders for the future that understand how they can influence and mobilize an audience about what matters to them. And then therefore we will create future leaders that can galvanize people to come together for the greater good. So I think for me, it's looking towards the future leaders that we need to be adaptable and resilient and tenacious and articulate and clear in what they want and need. So for me, having used the methods and the frameworks a lot with children across North Wales, I'd like every child in the UK to be able to benefit from it. So that would be my wand moment.
Thanks, Nina. Sophie?
See, my wand moment isn't very smart, because my wand moment would be that I'd want people to respect each other's expertise. And I think that would make a massive difference to the day-to-day work that we do, that if people just started respecting each other's expertise. They're respectful of each other, but the expertise. But I know that's not smart, so that's not the answer that you want necessarily. Smart, I'd say put more funding into the convening roles, put more space to allow these networks to form, because they do make a big difference in the long run.
Right, those were two wishes, Sophie, and I like them both. So yeah, we'll grant both, and also yours, Nina. So thank you very much, Nina, Sophie, for joining me. What I think really comes through from this conversation is that innovation in place is not only about ideas or investment or infrastructure, and in fact, largely it is about relationship, it's about trust, it's about stewardship, and the often unseen work of helping people, institutions, and communities move together. So we've heard from you about the differences between London and North Wales because of scale, context, but it looks like there are some common lessons. Skills are broader than we often admit. Convening and translating matter a big deal, and we also know now, and you learn from you, that participation, if it's to mean anything, it has to lead to action. And we can probably start from a young age. And perhaps most importantly, we've been reminded that the so-called glue work of local development, that brokering, that listening, that campaigning, that trust building, it is not and should not be thought of peripheral to change. And in fact, it should be center stage, especially by funding institutions like UKRI, because in many ways, that's what makes change possible. So, yeah, thank you both for sharing your insights, your experiences, reflections, and work. Really powerful, really impactful. I'm really pleased with this podcast. And thanks as well, everyone, for listening to the Placecast podcast from the Local Policy Innovation Partnership Hub at the University of Birmingham, part of the LP program financed by UKRI. I've been Gerardo Javier Arriaga-Garcia, and I hope you will join us again for the next episode. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.